Hello everyone and welcome. My name is Roberto Corona. I am an Italian anthroposopher and astrologer. In this video we're going to talk about the upcoming full moon in Pisces on September 7, which will be a total lunar eclipse, meaning that we're going to see the moon turning blood red. In short, this end of summer, this September, is definitely going to be a challenging season because during the transit of the Sun through Virgo, we're going to witness two eclipses, the last two of the year. In fact, if you remember, we have already talked about the March eclipses, and we're now entering eclipse season 2, which is the second sequence you can see down below here, which includes the total lunar eclipse in Pisces on September 7, and the partial solar eclipse in Virgo on September 21. So this is the chart of the eclipse. Let's start from the latest variations in the sky. On August 25, Venus entered Leo, whereas on September 1st, Saturn, moving retrograde, is getting back to Pisces. And Saturn is going to stay there for a long time, for more than 5 months, until February 14th of the next year. Then on September 2nd, the following day, we have Mercury entering Virgo. You can see it here together with the Sun in the chart. And finally, on September 6th, Uranus turns retrograde as well. This is because Saturn, Neptune, and Pluto are already retrograde. So we're going to have Saturn and all three the generational planets retrograde. Now, this is a lunar eclipse, so it is different from a solar eclipse. Now, lunar eclipses are by definition a full moon, and they represent the peak of the lunation cycle that began with the last new moon. And if you remember, the last new moon was in Virgo, and it was happening in conjunction with star Regulus. So it was a very powerful moon because being in such a close conjunction with a powerful fixed star definitely gives an extra oomph to powerful astral energies. And regarding eclipses in general, Rudolf Steiner said that during a solar eclipse, harmful astral forces are expelled out in the cosmos, but this is a lunar eclipse, and during a lunar eclipse, the opposite happens. So these harmful astral forces present in the cosmos have access to the Earth again. And in particular, they can access the Earth through the cone of shadow that the Earth projects on the moon during a lunar eclipse. Now, for this reason, we are exposed, especially in our thinking, to harmful thoughts of a Ahrimanic nature. Now, on top of that, as you may know, eclipses change depending on the lunar node in which they occur. And as you can see, the moon here is in close conjunction to the North Node, the so-called dragon's head, which is traditionally considered to be a little Jupiter, so to speak. This means this node brings an expansive and constructive quality, causing major and sudden beginnings or events that start something new. So let's now tackle the chart. The moon is located at 15 degrees and 22 minutes Pisces here in the, as you can see in the starry image of Aquarius. And being in Pisces, the moon is, of course, ruled by Jupiter, the lord of Pisces. And Jupiter is in Cancer, and it is making a trine with the moon. Now, on top of that, we have a beautiful mutual reception between the moon and Jupiter, because the moon is in Pisces, which is the zodiac sign of Jupiter, and vice versa. Jupiter is in Cancer, and Cancer is the zodiac sign of the moon, so they are receiving each other in their respective zodiac sign, and this is very good. This will definitely help to positively channel the destabilizing wave of the eclipse somehow. In fact, Jupiter, as you can see, is closing the opposition between the Sun and the Moon in a so-called Thales triangle. So basically we have a sextile between Jupiter and the Sun, and a trine between Jupiter and the Moon. So this is a Thales triangle. So Jupiter in turn, which is, basically the whole center of the chart, because Jupiter is the ruler of the chart. Jupiter in turn is making also a square to Mars in Libra. Now this is important because this represents the true tension of the chart. And a Mars in sextile is definitely in Mars in exile, is definitely in detriment. So it is not a good Mars. However, Mars is still receiving a little help from Venus. This is important because Venus, she is the ruler of Libra, and she is making a sextile supporting Mars. So this Mars is going to be a little bit affected by what this Venus is doing, as we're going to see. Okay, let's now tackle the meanings of the chart starting from a physical perspective. Now, from this standpoint, the forces of Pisces are not very stable. They represent the dissolution of personal boundaries, as well as national ones, national boundaries. Now, since Jupiter is in Cancer, a sign that represents home, yes, but also, in general, our sense of belonging to the motherland, this eclipse will tend to activate issues related to boundaries, of course, but in particular to the motherland. So all war fronts are involved because those are places where a nation's borders are disputed, basically. And please note that on a personal level, this could definitely apply to the borders of our property, for example, especially if you have issues with your neighbors, for example. And in this sense, the square between Jupiter in Cancer and Mars in Libra, so this is the main tension of the chart, can definitely represent legal issues related, for example, to international law and to agreements. Now, in my opinion, these agreements that are on the table, they're going to fail. Why is that? Why am I saying that they will tend to fail? Because this full moon is the manifestation of the last new moon in Virgo, and the ruler of the last new moon was making a sextile with Mars in Libra. But now the ruler of this full moon is making a square aspect with Mars in Libra again. In short, we move from a sextile aspect in the new moon chart to a square in the full moon chart. So this means that the manifestation of this process is a sort of worsening of some kind, because we go from a sextile, which is a good aspect, to a square, which is a challenging one. Now, what about all these tensions? So the main reason behind these tensions can be traced to Venus in Leo. Again, Venus, she is the ruler of Libra, so we can definitely understand better this Mars by looking at what Venus is doing. So what does Venus represent? Here, Venus represents high demands, high expectations on the part of heads of state. Why heads of state? Because Leo is the zodiac sign of the kings, of the ruling class, and so on. So heads of state here in Leo, especially through a Venus, they are expecting to obtain too much from these negotiations and therefore are unable to reach an agreement. And the result is an unstable national borders caused by Pisces energies. Moving on to a more psychological perspective, this eclipse brings us a lot of water element, therefore a lot of emotion, because water is the element of emotion that we must keep at bay, especially if these emotions are caused by dark, gloomy thoughts to which the eclipse, as we said, opens the doors to. So we must close the doors, so to speak, to these dark thoughts here, not listening to them, being aware that they are only the astral manifestation of a difficult transit and it will pass. Instead, we can focus on making the most out of this full moon, especially because we have this beautiful mutual reception between the moon and Jupiter. So this reception represents great forces of compassion, and this is because Pisces and Cancer, they are both water sign, and together they tend towards compassion. So from this perspective, what about the square between Jupiter in Cancer and Mars in Libra from a psychological perspective? So Mars in an air sign such as Libra represent our mind, whereas Jupiter in a water sign represent our heart. So we have a conflict between our mind and our heart. Our mind, Mars in Libra, wants to be right and just, but our heart, represented by Jupiter, makes us feel all the pain of others through compassion. So we have this conflict, and we don't really know what to do. So if you remember, we discussed about these forces of compassion in the last new moon video, and they were streaming down from the constellation of Leo through the sphere of the angels. And here we have the manifestation on a soul level of this very process. We have this active compassion, ready to help others in need. And it is precisely this good impulse of the soul that leads us towards the spiritual meanings of the chart. Now, the spiritual impulses are represented by a full moon shining in the starry image of Aquarius. As you know, I always use constellations to understand the spiritual impulse beyond the astral sphere. Now, in astrosophy, Aquarius is the constellation of the cherubim that are also called the spirits of harmony. Now, the cherubim represent the harmony that humanity will fully achieve only in the age of Aquarius. So during the next cultural epoch, we are not definitely there yet. Now, the cherubim inspire harmony between all beings, creating connections between the hearts of all creatures. So we are truly all connected from this perspective. And in this sense, these spiritual beings inspire this compassionate overcoming of the tensions between Jupiter and Mars, which can be achieved through the power of forgiveness. Now, forgiveness is a very challenging and complicated topic, but it is what allows us to escape a karmic cycle, of which eclipses are definitely a manifestation. In fact, as we know, during an eclipse, humanity's karma is released, and we can succeed in ending this cycle of action and reaction and retaliation only if we stop it, only if we adopt a higher perspective, a higher point of view. And this point of view is precisely that of the cherubim, the spirits of universal harmony. Now, as you know, we can use astrocartography to see where in the world the eclipse is going to be stronger. Basically, we can see here where the eclipse is going to occur on one of the four angles. We have four colored lines, and each line is associated to one of the angles. And the angles, by the way, are the most powerful points of a chart. So in red, we can see the ascendant line affecting Africa and Europe, which means that here the eclipse is going to be visible at sunset. In green, we have the midheaven line affecting India, Nepal, and China. And in yellow, we have the descendant line, which falls in the middle of nowhere. And in blue, we have the IC line that is going to affect the central part of the United States and Canada and parts of Mexico and Guatemala. Now, if we compare this chart with the actual path of the eclipse, we can see where the event will be stronger. So this is an image taken from the website timeanddate.com. And as you can see, the ascendant line here, therefore, Europe is going to witness the phenomenon, but especially China India, and so on, this area, this region of the world is definitely going to be more involved. As always, thanks for watching. If you want to support my work, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell not to miss out on future astrological insights, especially the next eclipse. I am Roberto Corona. See you in the next video.